Yo, welcome back to another video. Now in today's video we are going to be going over the new raid that came out. It has been a little while and I've kind of been grinding it, not fully, but I'm still yet to get CID myself. But I thought I'd make a video kind of just showing you a team comp that I would kind of recommend doing if you don't have any monarchs. This team comp is able to beat Act 2, which I would say is a lot better than just farming for Act 1, since Act 1 is only 1% while Act 2 is at a 3% drop chance. So let's get right into it. First off, what you're seeing in the background is me doing Act 1 with only mythic units with no traits. This I highly recommend no one doing. This is super slow, and I'd recommend taking your time to actually go out and grind exclusive units. Now the exclusive units I am talking about are Dante and Vergil. Both of these are crazy good units. I highly recommend getting them for anything in the game, and those are the two main units that I end up using for this comp, and basically being able to complete Act 2. Now I don't really experiment too much, so when it comes to replacements for these units, I don't really have any suggestions. I think Eisen could be good as a replacement for like damaging the boss, but at the same time I don't know how he performs without Monarch against the boss, so I don't really know. This is just simply a way I've found that has been pretty consistent. It can sometimes end up losing in the first phase, but from when I was testing it only happened to me once, and I'll show you what happens. But outside of that, this is a pretty good comp, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so let's begin with going over the team that I will be using for doing Act 2. Now the team that you see on screen, it is the team I recommend, but I do not recommend playing like this. This is 0 traits on Vergil and Dante. I don't have them on my other account, so I'm on my main account while doing this, but I'm using no familiars, which honestly probably the worst way to do it. It became very close towards the end, but let's go ahead and just go over the units in general and what they do. So first off, we have Vergil. Vergil is our main man when it comes to dealing damage. The reason this is because he has a demon trigger gauge, takes 10 attacks to fill up. It can be shortened if you have a black spirit familiar equipped to him, which I do recommend having on him. Once he has this doppelganger form, he essentially allows him to do double damage, which that is one really good thing about Vergil, is dealing double damage when he's in his demon trigger. The other thing is whenever he attacks a stun, frozen or time stop enemy, he has a 100% chance to follow up with another attack on that enemy. Now when this follow-up move, I recommend that you have it target the boss, because the follow-up move I believe is a single target when he's in his demon trigger at least. So you want to make sure that you have that set to a boss, so the boss is always getting hit with the follow-up attacks. Next up we have Dante. Dante is the same as Vergil with having a demon trigger, but his is more based around clearing out a bunch of enemies at once, because I think from what I could remember, in his demon trigger he does not attack the person that he is targeting with his follow-up attacks, but targets everyone else. I could be completely wrong, I'm just kind of going off what I slightly remember. Dante is mainly there to clear out the enemies and just help with the waves. The only problem he has is with beta, but I'll get into that after going over all the units. Alright, next up we have our third slot. These are supports to essentially make Vergil be able to do his follow-up attacks. Now one thing to note with Vergil's follow-up attacks, as long as there is a symbol, a freeze or stun symbol above the enemy's head, he can do a follow-up attack on them. This doesn't matter if they are currently stunned or frozen, or if it is during its lockout period where it's kind of dulled, the symbol is dulled, he will still be able to do a follow-up attack on those enemies as well. So let's get into the options that we have here. We have Esdeath as what I'd say the best option. She has a time freeze and she can freeze on hit. She also has a passive which allows her to mark a unit within range with the affection mark. Now the affection mark, whenever she uses her time freeze, that unit can deal 100% increased damage. So putting an affection mark on Vergil with Esdeath's time freeze is very strong. Amelia is just a good freeze unit. She can freeze enemies on hit and then can extend that duration by 2 seconds, meaning there is a longer period where Vergil is able to do his follow-up attacks essentially. Next up we just have the freeze units in general. These are all pretty decent units because most of them will be able to get the job done, but I have Fubuki at the front because she has the lowest SPA. I would recommend her over the other two, as the other two do have quite a long SPA, and she can also provide a SPA buff. Next up we have the stun units. If you just somehow don't have any freeze units, every single freeze unit that is currently in the game are limited units. Now 3 of them still are obtainable, but they are going away very soon, so that is why I have stun units. down here, but a little birdie told me that there potentially is a freeze unit around the corner, so do keep that in mind. So going over the stun units, we have Sasuke and Boo as probably the two better ones to use over Yoruichi and Deidara. This is because they have a relatively low SPA and can reliably stun. I have Yoruichi. She does have the fastest SPA, but she consumes stuns instantly, so it kind of gives a shorter period for Vergil to be able to do his follow-up attacks. That is why she is not really recommended. And then Deidara just has a long SPA. I wouldn't recommend using that. And then I have Johnny here. Johnny is a bit of a unique case. I feel like he could have some potential, but I probably would never recommend using him anyway. So once you get Johnny to his golden ratio and then also fully upgraded, he unlocks his ability, which gives him infinite spin on hit. Now infinite spin makes it so the enemy will constantly periodically get stunned without needing to hit the enemy. So that is why I have Johnny here, but it's kind of a joke. I wouldn't recommend using him. Okay, so let's get on to the 4th slot units. Now these are units that you would use to deal with the beta enemy, or supports if you have the options to deal with beta completely fine. So let's go over the first option. So first off, let's talk about Beta, the enemy. So she is a enemy that has overshield and resilient mutator. Now overshield, I believe, gives a just flat 50% damage reduction when they have an overshield. As soon as the overshield gets destroyed, they lose that 50% damage reduction. What resilient does is an enemy reduces damage taken based on how many more enemies are hit by that same attack. So a full AoE attack is able to hit a lot of enemies, meaning that it will reduce the damage taken from that attack. Essentially, with how packed the enemy density is on this map, Beta pretty much is 100% immunity to full AoE attacks. I do recommend having some sort of ignore damage reduction or the options that I'll speak about right now. Best way to deal with her is to use a con familiar. This gives damage reduction to the unit that it is equipped. It does require completing rifts, so not a lot of people might have that as an option. So let's go over the other options we have. First off, we have Lucy. Lucy on hit applies nullify, or now I believe it's called vulnerable. Vulnerable makes it so enemies lose their beneficial modifiers. This includes damage reduction, meaning Beta will be able to take the full amount of damage from any attack that she gets hit by. Lucy's also pretty good because at max upgrade she is full AoE, so she is hitting a lot of enemies. Next up, we have 2 units that ignore damage reduction. I don't have Jido up here because he does take a while to get. So we have on placement Gilgamesh and Toji. Both of these units have ignore damage reduction. Toji is 100% ignore damage reduction and Gilgamesh is 50%. Both of them are pretty good options in using to defeat Beta. And then lastly, if you just don't have any of those other options, you can use a Vegeta or a Lancer as just extra units to deal damage. You'll probably place them towards the end of the track to handle the Beta. I would recommend putting Vegeta to upgrade 2 and placing all 4 of them down. Don't know about Lancer, I just have him there because he is a pretty good unit as well. I'd probably recommend slightly upgrading if they start getting by, but I would place all 3 down all next to each other as well. If you do have a way of handling Beta, the 4th slot does get to open up into different options. You can either put another DPS unit on if you like, or what I have done for this video is I'm using a support. So we have the 2 wounded supports. We have Kisuke and Alucard. Alucard is the better one because you just place them down and they get the wounded effect. Kisuke, you need to get them to at least upgrade 4 for him to apply wounded, so there is that. But I use wounded effect because it is 20% more damage, which is typically better than most of the other supports because you do need to invest a little bit more to get that 20% damage buff on at least Subaru. So let's go over the buffing supports now. We have Haruka. She can get up to 16% increased damage and a little bit of range, 10%. Pretty good. Just place her down. That's all you need to do. She builds up over every wave. We have Subaru. Subaru is pretty good as well. On placement, it is 8% increased range and 10% damage. Once you upgrade him and use his ability, he gets an additional 10%. He gets an additional 10% damage buff, which is pretty good, and you get refunded 48k yen back. It does cost 60k to max upgrade him, so you lose out on 12k yen essentially. And then last we have Yuhaba. He has a good damage buff as well, but I would not recommend using him because you do need to spend, like, I can't remember the exact price, but you need to fully max upgrade him to be able to use his buff. And lastly we have Hercule. Hercule does a 10% damage buff and does a 15% crit damage buff. This is at upgrade 7, but the other additional thing that he does is per upgrade he does 2% increased money gain up to, I believe it's 20% at max upgrade. So it is pretty good having additional money come in, but yeah, you will need to invest into him as well if you want that. So that is the option for for your 4th slot. And then lastly, of course, 5th and 6th slot is going to be Takaroda and Speedwagon. I would probably not recommend trying to do this raid if you do not have all 6 slots available, as you are really limiting yourself to how you will be able to build your team. So yeah, I recommend being at least level 50 to get into this raid. And lastly, before I go over just like showcasing my runs, let's go over the familiar options that we have for all of our units. So first off, any unit that is not Vergil or Dante, I would just recommend putting a Padoru on them. This is just to give that extra yen gain or reduced cost of your units, which is pretty nice. Plus the random like damage or range buff is pretty good. That is what I'd recommend on any unit that is not Vergil or Dante. Next up is Vergil. The first familiar I would recommend is the Black Spirit. This is to have at least downtime when Vergil is not in his Devil Trigger form, as it will just require him to use less attacks to get to that Devil Trigger form. The other two familiars I would recommend is a lot of visits for just that general damage buff and SPA buff, or if you do have a good roll, I would recommend Burb, but I know not a lot of people would have a crazy roll for it, so that is just an option if you do somehow have one. And then lastly, we have Dante. Dante, I would just recommend using Gon on him for the damage reduction. It just means that you do not need to worry about the beta enemies going by along the track and you have to deal about them later. Or if you are using like a Lucy or something, then you can opt into using a crit familiar, that being Papa, Turbo Granny, or like before, have a good roll on a Burb. I would recommend using Burb as well. Okay, so enough explaining the units and familiars, let's get into the runs. So as you can see, I've had this been playing in the background. This is the first run I did. This was traitless Vergil and Dante with 0 familiars equipped. Would not recommend this. As you can see, the betas are getting really close to the base, so it was a lot of micromanaging between choosing whether or not to upgrade my Vergils or choose to upgrade other units so that these beta enemies would not go by and hit the base. Pretty annoying. I definitely would recommend getting some sort of damage reduction to be able to do it, but as you can see, without any familiars equipped and also no traits, you can do this, but definitely would not recommend doing it. This is the next run that I did. It was with Lucy, traitless, no familiars. I went to wave 5 to basically skip the farming that I did. If there is a Zeta that spawns early, I just let it kind of walk by. So first off, I placed down one Dante and upgraded to 2. Then I placed down a Lucy, and then I placed down another Dante and upgrade that one to 2 as well. And then I finish off completing my farms. I will then get one of my Dantes to upgrade 6, and that usually is enough to be able to hold out. And then after that, I upgrade my Lucy to max upgrade to get the full AoE. From here, what I want to do is kind of set up for like my later game where I will place down a Dante towards where I want to eventually move all my Dantes to, because we will be killing all the enemies off of spawn instead of needing to wait for them to go around the entire bend. Plus, I'm wanting to have at least 160,000 yen to be able to place down all 3 of my Vergils and upgrade them all to their last attack straight away. This is because Smith John, or John Smith, said he has a mechanic called the Cage. This will spawn at a certain HP level that he'll have, and from there you have a certain amount of time to be able to deal enough damage to him within a time frame before it wipes you. So it is essentially a damage check, or a DPS check as I like to say. You have to deal enough damage within a certain amount of time before the mechanic goes ahead and wipes you. It is pretty common within certain raid like encounters in other games, so it is pretty cool to see that in this game as well. I also placed down 2 Amelias. I make sure every Vergil is targeting the boss and also the Amelias, so they are always hitting him. Also, after you soon place the Vergils and Amelias down, what I did here was not recommended. You would actually want to place a Dante closer to the boss so he can start hitting him sooner. As you can see, I nearly wiped on this one. That was my mistake here, but that is essentially all you need to worry about. Now it is on to the Lord of Shadows, which is very simple. There is no DPS check or damage check. That is probably the toughest part to go by, is completing the damage check. Now it is basically taking your time to slowly kill the boss. You should have enough damage to clear out the enemies completely fine, and then just go around and you count the numbers and hit the pillars in order of what the numbers were. Not all mounts are able to do this. Some mounts are too big to be able to hit the pillars, but I would recommend using a mount to just go around and hit the pillars. I also use a Nimbus Cloud later on. You don't need the best mount to be able to, or you don't need the fastest mount to be able to do this. I used a Nimbus Cloud and and I also have done it from just running. So you do not need a mount, but a mount does help. But yeah, let me just skip ahead to the results now because this is essentially the same thing over and over again. So yeah, let's check out the end results and how long this took. All right, so the end result for Luce, no traits, no familiars, we ended up being at 16 minutes and 30 seconds. Now the previous run took us 17 minutes and 23 seconds, so we cut off the time by a minute by adding a way for us to be able to deal with beta pretty easily. Okay, so my next run, I am not using Luce anymore. I'm using Iske again, but this time I am bringing in familiars. I have a 40% gone on my Dante. I do have a higher roll gone, but I went with something that is kind of like the minimum that you would want. And then I have a lot of visits on my Vergil. Now I could use a Black Spirit or a Burb because I do have a really good Black Spirit and a really good Burb. But since this is the raid that you need to beat to be able to access those two familiars, I thought it's best not to use them because you might be wanting to do this for the first time, so you won't have access to either of those familiars. So one main reason why I have skipped quite ahead in this one is because this is the initial attempt that I ended up just randomly failing on. I think this may have just been because the devil trigger timing with this cage spawning, it just wasn't that good. So I guess there's a little bit of RNG to that where if you just unfortunately have the timings wrong, you can end up losing. It is what it is. If this just happens every now and then, it's fine. This was the only time it happened, and this was when I had better things on my units as well, which is kind of weird compared to me being able to do it traitless and without any familiars. So now we're on to the one where I did complete it with the same setup of no Luce, no traits, but we have familiars. Essentially refer back to the run that I did with the Luce, except ignore the parts where you upgrade Luce and just you can start working on trying to get your Vergils down earlier. That is essentially all the difference between those two runs are. You should be fine with at least a 40% gone. Getting higher is much better though, as you'll see in my next run where I do have a higher percent. Now we did finish this run in 15 minutes and 15 seconds, which is pretty good honestly for no traits and somewhat decent familiars. I think this is a good run. Now for the last run, we went and kind of just put in traits this time. We are using Deadeye on Dante and we're using Ethereal on our Vergil. I am actually using a Black Spirit this time on my Vergil, and I'm using a 60% ignore damage reduction gone on my Dante. Now this is just kind of showing you like how much faster it is. Unfortunately, I ended up only completing it in 15 minutes and 10 seconds. I think the reason why is because I was just slow with farming earlier on. I should have started attacking the boss a lot sooner than when I started, and I probably would have ended up getting a faster time, but I just took a while at the start of the run. I think that's why this took like very similar time to when I didn't have any traits on and worse of familiars, so that is on me for that. But yeah, 15 minutes in general without a monarch is pretty good, I'd say. Personally, with my monarchs that I have been using in farming, I'm getting around 9 minute to 10 minute clears, so 5 minutes slower. Yes, it is 5 minutes slower, but it is pretty good, especially if you aren't even able to beat Act 1 within 5 minutes. I think it's still really worth it to do Act 2 over Act 1 because it is 3 times the drop rate for CID and for the Burb. So that is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this helps anyone that was struggling with this or needed some sort of method to be able to beat Act 2. I appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. See ya.